you have to manage boys differently to girls. They are hardwired differently. And you can take exceptions, of course. You know, you've got girls who, they call them tomboys. You don't call a rough boy a tomboy. You say, he's a boy.
Hello and welcome to Women Unfiltered, where each week we bring you frank and honest debates, all from a female perspective. On the show today, boys will be boys, asking whether we need to change the way boys are raised. How do we ensure they're confident and respectful while preventing misogynistic attitudes and the threat of violence? Columnist at The Guardian, Zoe Williams, dating expert, Kezia, and writer and broadcaster, Esther Krakow. But now, buckle up, because this is Women Unfiltered. First up, the term boys will be boys is used to refer to a boy's more adventurous, active and risk-taking side, but it appears to have morphed into an excuse for bad behaviour. Donald Trump once famously referred to conversations detailing sexual assault as locker room talk, harmless and inherent of what men do when they're together. Now, an increasing awareness of the price of toxic masculinity has led many parents to wonder how best to prepare the young men of the future. So, Zoe, is it time that we started to look into the way that we're raising boys?
I kind of think this is, the Me Too movement did not change what we expect, the way we expect men to treat women, right? It didn't, all it did was make women more likely to speak out. So it made it harder to get away with treating women badly. It made it harder to get away with sexual assault, sexual violence, and innuendo, harassment. It made everything like that harder to get away with because you're more likely to get called out. But it didn't actually change anything in terms of what the baseline standards you'd accept.
Well, boys should be raised by the men we want them to become. That was always the standard. You don't want, boys to be raised by men that have no respect, period, that have no boundaries, that are narcissists or, egomaniacs or anything like that. But I think the idea around, the Me Too movement making it harder to navigate intersexual dynamics, that's a completely different situation, because the Me Too movement was concentrated in Hollywood, in a very forward-facing industry. And, the dynamics of how people interact in those industries are different, right? You have the casting couch where women are, happy to exchange sexual favors for film roles. And you also have the Harvey Weinsteins who were aided and abetted by people in the industry. So I think it's a completely different issue. And when people conflate the idea that, because of the Me Too movement, men should be scared of women and all of that, I think they're having two separate conversations. Obviously, I recognize that if you are, a high-profile individual, you are more at risk of people just making claims to take advantage of you, regardless of who you are. I think in particular industries, that's a bit more acute. So male sports stars, for instance, they know that if you're a famous footballer and you make a point of sleeping around or getting involved with all sorts of unsavory women, the chances of you meeting a woman who's unscrupulous enough to try and level fake allegations towards you, which I'm not saying happens all the time, but it does happen, is a lot higher. Again, those are separate conversations from people in the general public. So I think we need to separate those two.
Masculine traits. What's wrong with masculine traits? What's wrong with them? There's toxic traits. I don't say that it's toxic masculinity or toxic feminism. There are just toxic traits. There are things that as a human being, female or male, you do not do. You treat people with respect. On the whole, girls, you can tell them, don't do this because this will happen, and they understand consequences without having to experience the pain or the consequence in itself. With boys, they go, yeah, and then they have to go fall over and actually experience it, go do the thing you've told them not to do, and then they get it.
The thing is, that isn't really backed up in the data. I mean, if you look at any of the work of Cordelia Fine, which is quite old now, it's been around for probably 15 years, there are a huge number of perceptions of the way boys learn, the way girls learn, the way boys behave, the way girls behave, which are actually just socially reinforced.
I think there's conflicting theories.
There aren't conflicting theories. There's loads of data.
When we're talking about learning outcomes, for instance, we know that boys are more visual and they learn better by doing than seeing. Women learn differently because the way we communicate is different, and that's backed up by the scientific data. That's backed up by the scientific data in terms of our brain structure. That's why if you take 100 people in society, the people on both ends in terms of the distribution, on the best and worst, and with regards to certain subjects like literature or abstract mathematics, they tend to lean more towards one gender or the other. That's
Can we let Kezia, because Kezia, Zoe, we'll come to you in a second. Can we let Kezia
dismissing anecdotal evidence. I challenge you now, but I challenge you to go walk into a nursery and look at the boys and girls who are all treated pretty much the same. And the boys are playing more rough. The boys are disrupting the class a lot more. You have to manage boys differently to girls. They are hardwired differently. And you can take exceptions, of course. You know, you've got girls who, they call them tomboys. You don't call a rough boy a tomboy. You say, he's a boy. Yeah. Because it's the exception. And so I challenge you, go into a nursery, sit there, look for yourself.
The real fear now is the rise of characters like Andrew Tate and young boys looking to that for inspiration. There's got to be something in this and the surge of popularity.
Well, I mean, I genuinely think when I look at the kind of manosphere and all the work that's been done in this area is really interesting, because you do find a kind of real vulnerability to it between like 10 and 13. And I think it is because people talk about boys as though they're innately different and innately worse than girls. And then I think that kind of drives them into this alienation narrative that makes them very, very susceptible to people saying, you've been alienated, this is how to retake your identity from the alienation. And my personal solution to that is to say and parent according to what I believe anyway, which is based on the reading I've done, which is that actually the genders are not that different. And there's much more that separates us. There's much more difference within a gender than there is between a gender.
Fundamentally, they're the same. They need love. Boys need love as much as girls. This is a complete fallacy when they say, oh, boys have to be more independent and stop crying, you need to man up. I don't agree with that. I actually don't agree with that. So I agree with you that they are fundamentally the same. They need love, they need discipline, they need all the sorts. But I think the way you manage it is different with boys.
Yeah.
I think the rise of people like Andrew Tate has happened where there's been a vacuum. So I said initially, how do we want to raise our boys? Well, the way we want to raise our boys is for them to be raised by the kind of men we want them to be. I would say in the case of Andrew Tate, for instance, I would say he's like a 14-year-old boy's, comic book character come to life. He's almost like a superhero, like
or super villain the other side.
Yeah, but he is a character that's unattainable, right? With the fast cars and the women and all of that. And in a society where the overwhelming majority of men felt like they had healthy role models to lean on, he would just become a figure of fascination, right? When I saw this Andrew Tate thing with my brother, because my brother and I have a very close relationship with our parents, but he in particular with our father, and disclaimer, we're Ghanaian, we grew up in Ghana, and then we moved here when we were teenagers. We were just like, obviously we can see through this, but there are people that can't, that are genuinely like that. And I think that's where the discussion begins. I'm not really interested in Andrew Tate in the sense of his personal life, because I don't know him, I've never met him. I work in media, so I understand that your online persona and how you are in person can be very different, so I'm not interested in that at all. I think we should be talking about him in the sense of why. Yes. Like, why is he a thing? Not in terms of his personal life, but what is it about him? What is the void? What are people trying to fill? And that's where the conversation really should be going.
I mean, I don't want to... We could talk about Andrew Tate for ages, but I think...
I don't want to be boring and keep going on about facts, but there are some facts which are wrong in that. Single parenting is relatively stable. It is normally single mothers, but actually the role of the father in a separated family is so much more pronounced now than it was in the 80s and 90s, that all the evidence is that people have much more relationship with their dad after a separation now. My sense in the Me Too movement was that, as I said, it doesn't really change the standards we accept, it changes one's behaviour within it. But, what I would say to all of you is that the rape has been effectively decriminalised in this country. The rate of conviction is 1%.
Yeah.
So the idea that our main problem as a society is false accusations rather than unprosecuted cases is really, really, really...
If my son, he made a pass at a girl, and she didn't find him her type, she could go then and say to the teacher, he made a pass at me,
also,
that's
I
abuse.
Think you are minimizing...
That's what I'm worried about. So it's...
Well, yeah, of course.
Obviously, if my boy has done something wrong, I want him to, have to face...
I think...
exactly, but are you scared for your son to be accused of something?
Not just my son, but I feel sorry for men who want to approach a beautiful woman in the street and they can't, because they feel like they might be accused of being a creep. or
Also,
something.
I think you're minimizing the impact of just of an allegation against the man. This is the thing. You're talking about, oh, rise in allegation, maybe women are more comfortable. Actually, all it takes is an allegation for it to be on the Daily Mail, which I've seen, or the Daily Express, or whatever.
Well, the thing is,
hold on. Let me.
Can we just let Esther finish and then Zoe will come to you?
But those just allegations are enough to have a significant impact on men's lives, and we've seen this with many actors. Kevin Spacey, for instance, that one of the guys who accused him was a known liar, and he's not facing any consequences. But Kevin Spacey's career has all but vanished in the course of this, this 3-year legal debacle. I'll be honest. My brother's 24. I tell him you need to either get in a long-term relationship with a good, stable girl that's vetted by yours truly, or you need to be very, very careful with women. If you're in a room with a woman in a professional setting, leave the door open. Don't put yourself in a situation where you'll be around women that are drunk or intoxicated, and you're just alone with them, and you can be held responsible for that. I'm not saying it's a women-only problem. Absolutely not. And I'm not saying women are the only people that lie. Absolutely not. But it's a lot easier to get away with doing these things these days without consequences, and that's something that I want to protect my brother from.
But do you think men are scared to be, and boys are scared to be left alone with women now?
I think the media exaggerates that a bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
I know. My sister's a
crazy.
teacher at secondary school. She goes with a lot of everyone's, having a good old time. I'm going to put it like that. And she goes, there's still a lot of flirting and people sending photographs to each other, boys and girls equally. So I think we kind of have to. Again, anecdotal. You don't like anecdotal stuff. I've noticed. You like facts.
I like anecdote when it's meaningful, but I love your sister anecdote. I really do, and I agree with her.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure she's brilliant.
Okay.
The goalposts are sliding all over the place. Now I'm astonished to hear you say that you advise your brother to kind of. I don't know, suspect women.
To be cautious. Absolutely.
But I think you're right. You're right to do that. And men do need allies, but I think that's all we've got time for. Thank you so much for that very, very fierce debate. Now, this is the part of the show where we take a look at some of the headlines circling our debate and we try to fill in the blanks. So, kicking off with the first one from Spiked Online. Blank is ruining the lives of teenage boys.
I'm going to go wokerati.
Porn. I think
it's porn.
Wokerati, Kezia.
Girls.
And the answer is...
I bet it's feminism.
Close.
It's #MeToo.
Oh, okay, close.
Okay, let's take a look at the next headline from the New York Post. Gen Z women are painting on blank to reject men. What do you think that could be?
I don't even understand.
No, I don't understand.
Makeup, maybe?
Yeah, makeup.
Painting on.
Because it makes them seem more attractive than they are. So they also get a heightened sense of self-importance. I don't know.
What do you have a quick guess, or do you have the same guess?
Filter? I don't know. I've got no idea.
Okay.
A tattoo?
So, Esther, you were right. It's a trend called unapproachable makeup, and like you said, it's very heavy makeup. And there's a trend on social media where women are plastering it on so that men are intimidated.
I don't think it's to reject men. I think it's to buttress a warped sense of self.
My mother used to tell us that women who wore red lipstick and had red nails wanted to look like they'd just eaten a man. Because
I concur.
She was like an 80s feminist, and but we were like very literal-minded, and we're like, wow.
Absolutely. My nickname is man-eater.
My mother, I wear an anklet. And my mother said, don't wear an anklet, only a prostitute wears an anklet.
My mother says that as well.
Okay.
Oh my God. I thought it was only a man thing.
I genuinely didn't know that was a thing.
She was like, you look like a prostitute. I'm like, Mum, I'm not a whore.
But do you think men would ever be accused of any of those things if they had tattoos or...?
To an extent. But obviously, a woman's physical beauty is far more powerful and as a result, far more harshly judged than a man.
That's a wonderful way to describe it.
Yeah.
I like that, powerful. Right, lastly, this one from self.com. Keep him blank, advice for people raising sons.
From my experience, keep them entertained.
Okay.
Yeah, keep him scared.
Okay, the actual correct answer is emotional. So keep him emotional, advice for people raising sons.
Absolutely not.
I think that's a great idea.
Hell no. There's too much emotion.
Life is very difficult for men and for women in different ways. I don't think it's helpful to teach men to break down or the way we try and normalize men is how women think men should be from our perspective, but we're not men. This is why I said leave the job to raising good men to the kind of men that you want them to be. That's it, because we will never understand things from a man's perspective. We never understand the worries of having to, you know, deal with the man bits where you have to tuck and you get rejected by women and you have to deal with growth spurts and your voice dropping and all of that. We don't have to deal with any of that. We have our own problems. We're unique and we're beautiful and we're powerful in our own ways, but we are not men. And then so we have to leave the raising of men to men who are good men.
All right, you've been sending us your questions ahead of this week's show, and we're going to do our best to answer one of them now. Simon asks, many boys today define masculinity negatively. If you were to tell a boy to be a man today, what would that mean? Zoe?
Well, I think the problem is historically, when people have said to boys, be a man, they're defining men negatively against women. So they're saying, when they say be a man, they mean be courageous,
don't be a woman,
strap on a pair, have a spine, don't be a pussy. And that's like, the negative comparison there is women and, you know, these kind of jellyfish who can't assert themselves. And that, I think, is why that fell out of fashion. And I think there is definitely, I think there's a problem with looking at traits that you have that are common to your entire gender and then being proud of them in some way, because it kind of requires you to denigrate the other gender in order to take that as a positive thing. You know, it's like and I feel the same way about women who think that they're so great for being women. As soon as you start accruing a whole set of qualities to your own gender, you're implying that the other gender is worse.
But there's a baseline for all human interactions, which is respect, mutual respect. It has to be rooted in love and, you know, wanting to get the best out of someone. I mean, that's gender neutral.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about what it means to be a man, yes, protect and provide. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think it means that, oh, a woman can't provide or whatever. But it's just that is your fundamental role, period.
I think a man in certain... with people again, but maybe specifically more men, they need to have a positive outlook and be solutions-based rather than catastrophizing with the women and children kind of thing. Yeah, I would say that, but I wouldn't say much further than that. I think that as long as you just be respectful and a good person, let's not overcomplicate it.
Well, I think that's a very important note to finish on. Thank you so much. That's all we've got time for today. My thanks to Esther, Zoe, and Kezia. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on this debate, whether you agree, disagree with any of us. And we'll see you next time for more Women Unfiltered.